Today I want to talk about the age-old question of whether or not you can be good apart from God. Because in all of my time in Christianity, I heard this debated relatively often. But it's a common question and people wonder about it. And generally, the generally accepted answer inside of Christianity is that no, you can't be good apart from God. But we say it because we fear God's reprisal if we say anything else. And then we look around us in the world and we see tons of people who sure look like they're being good people. And then we hope we're being good people, right? The answer out in the world when you're not in the church is that of course you can be a good person, right? And they mock us for thinking that you can't. Then you have Jesus, right? When the guy came up to him and said, "Good teacher, what must I do to receive eternal life, to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? No one's good except God." That's a pretty definitive statement. So, I want to talk about another part of the Bible that actually answers this question in a very interesting way. Genesis 2 and 3, wherein we have the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which they were tempted to eat from, right? And what does that fruit promise? It actually gives a list of its characteristics in Genesis 3, 5, and 6. And those characteristics are as follows. It promises to make you wise, promises that your eyes can be opened, and it promises that what? That you can be like God. Okay? So when you think about this stuff, when you think about that and you pray about it, then you will understand eventually when God explains it to you that this was not just an ordinary piece of fruit. This is a spiritual dynamic that it's talking about. And that spiritual dynamic, it's a spiritual source of sustenance. When you sustain yourself, anybody, I speak in general terms. I don't assume anything about any individual viewer. But when you sustain yourself spiritually on the knowledge of good and evil, which basically is what the world is doing, which is why it's all split up and at factions and different philosophies and different religions and different governments and different ideologies and go to war and all that stuff. So it's a direct result of those three characteristics of that spiritual fruit, okay? In opposition to what? Living in love with God. So if you look at that story in a spiritual sense, you see that they were living in love with God. They had no problems. They had no evil. And then they partook of that fruit, which has very definitive characteristics, and then all the problems started. Okay? So when you partake of that fruit spiritually, it does those three things for you. Okay? But it's not what we need. It's the antithesis of living in love with God, which is what we were created for. So those three things, it promises, it doesn't really, but it promises to make you like God. So if you think of all the attributes of God, name them, there's probably hundreds, right? Justice, mercy, kindness, righteousness, holiness, perseverance, faithfulness. The list could be endless here, right? Just think of all the good things, right? All the good traits that we all value so much: loyalty, honesty, steadfastness, sacrificial, all of these traits, right? If you think of all those traits and you think about the fact that, well, this fruit promises that you can have all of those things on your own, you can do it yourself. You don't need God to do all those things. You can be like God. Okay? Which, if you think logically about that, is the point of the majority of, or all of the religions in the world. All of the religions in the world, even though they have different details, right? Different leaders, different gods, which are not really gods, different icons, different practices, different cultural meaning, all of that stuff, right? But they all promise the one same thing. What do they promise? That you can be a good person. And it actually, so that answers the question, can you be a good person apart from God? And the other two characteristics of the fruit play into that, right? You can be wise, you can have your eyes enlightened, right? Which is talking about your spiritual eyes, not your physical eyes. You can see all this stuff. So when you get this wisdom on your own, whatever it is, name the wisdom, there's tons of it. When you get enlightened on, on your own, all this is apart from Christ and apart from God. You get all this wisdom and this enlightenment, and you're able to be good on your own. Then what? Then you can be good apart from God. That is the express purpose of that fruit. It's not just a nice story, right? Where they were living in the garden and they were eating fruit. That might have been the physical setting, but this is the spiritual reality that it encapsulated. Okay? The spiritual realm, is upholding and sustains the physical realm. Okay? So when you see things in the physical, you can know that the spiritual realm is behind it, making it work. Okay, that's just a truth. It's an eternal truth, because the spiritual realm is the real realm, the realer realm. This realm is real. I don't mean to say that, but it's the more real realm. It's the more solid realm. Okay, and it basically animates the physical realm. Okay, so that story in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, mostly 2 and 3, I'm talking about now, is that it's a physical story of a spiritual reality. Okay, a spiritual reality that tells us where religion comes from and what it'll do for you. And what does it do for you? It affords you the opportunity to be good apart from God. So the definitive answer to that question is yes, you can be good apart from God. But at what cost? That's what you need to ask yourself, because if you look at that story, the cost was love with God. They traded in love with God. That was the price they paid to be like God on their own and to be good on their own. The same thing happens today the world over. It's no joke. It's a spiritual reality. And people all over the world, in religions, but also in other established, what do I want to call them, groups, beliefs, mindsets that claim no religion, but they run on the same spirit, they are all doing that. They are all being good apart from God. And in the process, okay, I'm going to quit right there. Thank you and have a nice day.